And we're back, everybody, with Marc Whitmire. Marc, thank you for joining us on We the People.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I think we're going to change the way that I would normally begin. We're going to say hi to Laura Live and good. Now we're going to talk about net neutrality and your internet connection.
It's a great place to start.
I think it is. So thank you for being here, everybody. This is We the People, now that we have everybody set. And this is an engagement broadcast. This is the lovely Laura Live and good with us, and she's going to take your questions several times during the program. So have them ready. Laura, tell them how to engage.
Yes, if you are watching us live, you have the option of logging in and being in part of our live chat, and you can ask questions to Marc directly. But please, if you are asking a question, write the word in question all in caps, or tag me so that I can see. I need to scan the chat to find the questions and make it easy for me. And I will also drop his website so you can get the basics. And but please, we'll stop a couple times during the show to ask him your questions directly.
Awesome.
Make them good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laura. Marc, so you were telling us when we got you back that occasionally your internet there just drops out every once in a while, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's completely unbeknownst to me what's actually going on, but yeah, it'll kind of randomly. It's usually about this time of day. It might be maintenance. I have absolutely no idea.
It could be. We never know. But I mean we hear stories of bad service. It's basically an infrastructure issue. We have problems with the infrastructure across America. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's a group of civil engineers that stated, I believe we have about a $4.6 trillion repair bill that's been coming due for quite some time.
Nice. 4.6, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Quite a bit.
So with the internet, recently, FCC just reversed net neutrality rules. And while it's a bad thing, I believe it's a bad thing, and I believe you've actually posted on social media about it not being the right thing to go. It opens up opportunities for communities. We're going to talk about that in a second. But where do you what do you think we should do right now at the federal level and then at the state level for Tennessee with regard to the FCC ruling and net neutrality?
Gotcha. I believe part of the FCC ruling actually barred states from ruling in favor of net neutrality. Or in favor of actually creating their own laws to create net neutrality in the states. But as far as net neutrality on the federal level, I believe that we need the internet to be a Title II common carrier. It needs to be classified that way. The internet access was actually declared by the UN a few years ago to be a human right. At this day and age, you can't really apply for a job. Children can't even study for tests. You can't take online courses for colleges. We need access to internet. The internet needs to be open and free. And I believe that in 2018 and the years beyond, once we get a brand new Congress installed, we're going to rectify this issue and permanently classify internet service providers as Title II common carriers.
Well said, and I agree with you. I hope so. But you said a very important point at the end that once we have a brand new Congress. Right.
Yes.
It's not going to happen with the current employees, is it?
No, they were oddly silent, which may actually be slightly better. If you recall, in 2014 and 2015, most legislators were actually against net neutrality rules. So we kind of almost prefer them to be silent if the FCC would actually perform their function.
Right.
But whenever we have a lawyer for Verizon heading up the FCC, that's just not going to happen.
Right. And even though Verizon and all the other companies have said that they're not going to mess with the net neutrality rules, right? They're not going to create slow and fast lanes. Do we believe them? Do you believe them?
Funny you should ask. I believe the day that it was announced that net neutrality protections would be reversed, I think it was Comcast revoked the actual pledge that they had put to never violate net neutrality, which they had stated back during the Obama era whenever it was looking like net neutrality rules were going to pass.
Yes.
So I don't believe that any of the other carriers have done so, or at least I haven't heard about it. My own personal ISP actually sent us a letter that stated directly that they were going to obey the original net neutrality laws. They're not a nationwide provider, so far as I know. I didn't want to plug them or anything because this is not an advertisement show, but that's uncommon from what I've seen.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. I have Comcast as service, right? And they claim they're not going to do anything, but they already kind of do. They already create service levels that you can only gain if you have a lot of money, and a lot of those levels should be available just from a city, a community. Gigabit speed should be available to the community. I guess is what I'm saying in the 21st century at this point.
Oh yeah.
And where I'm going with this, what I would like your opinion on, is community-run ISPs, because the only benefit of the FCC ruling is it really opens the door for communities to make them themselves, right? And and what's the other thing interesting? Like California is trying two internet regulation laws, regardless of the federal ruling, so that'll be interesting to see what they're doing with that. But how do you feel about the idea of community-run or locally run ISPs competing? And keeping that control within the community against providers like Comcast?
Oh, I think it's wonderful. As a Republican, I do like free market principles, and that involves competition.
There you go.
So anytime we put more competition into the markets, it's only going to get better. The town I actually used to live in for 6 years had a community-run ISP. I wasn't lucky enough to be inside the area. I was just outside their coverage, but they had higher speeds than any competitors for a much lower cost. I believe it was about half the cost for about twice the speed.
Wow. And actually the cost, that's impressive for the cost, because like Longmont, city of Longmont, Colorado, they built their own fiber extensions. The city, Fort Collins is now going to build their own ISPs because of the ruling. Their costs are actually a little higher because of where they're at in rural areas, but people are willing to pay for it because that separates them from the big corporate interests. So I didn't even realize that you had that option in the community you were in. That's really cool to know. Awesome. You're on top of that.
Oh, yeah. Some cities around here are actually pretty progressive when it comes to utilities and things. That same community actually had curbside recycling that was picked up, that was included in your property taxes.
Wow.
It was a very rural area, but they actually had some pretty progressive policies when it came to utilities and things like that, because it really comes to quality of life, really. And it was a smaller community, so our voices were received a bit more readily by the people there. Now, as far as the cost, I do find it kind of interesting that the fiber optic network there was actually cheaper than some of the other carriers.
Yeah.
And so that leads me to kind of two different questions. One, there might have already been some underlying structure that was being installed that led it to be a little bit cheaper. Or two, and this is more likely, I would think that some of the current ISPs probably inflate their prices quite a bit. And that would also account for the difference in cost there.
Exactly, and that's the only fear that I know small ISP owners have with that, is that a pricing war they wouldn't win a pricing war if Comcast decided to just drop prices far below any kind of profit margin for a small company, right? And that would be the only advantage they have there. But if the community understands that what they're getting out of it is an actual free internet, if they stick with the local ISP, I would think that would be a good reasoning. And competition, like you said, small business.
Yeah.
Republicans are supposed to be about small business competition. You're a brand new Congress endorsed Republican candidate. That's a rarity.
Yes, sir. There are currently only two of us. We're looking to expand the slate, though. We're actually looking into a couple different Republicans that have similar ideals. I've been asked to look into a couple of them. They seem like pretty solid people. We'll have to see what happens, but there is a movement across the country of independent-minded Republicans that see what is going on in our government and especially in our party, and we're against it, and we want to reform the GOP.
Nice. So your term, there's an independent Republican. I like that. That's different, separate from the GOP or the establishment machine, right? And so I take it you're not going to get any help from the GOP party in your candidacy.
Well, let's just say they haven't been knocking on my door just yet. Well, fingers crossed, right? But I don't really foresee that. The only thing I could see that would help is, across the country, we've seen in Virginia recently, there were Democrats that were elected into a lot of places that have been heavily Republican before that. And of course, we had Doug Jones winning in Alabama, which that's kind of sad to me that it took basically a child molester to get the Republican Party to kind of open their eyes there to think maybe they're not bulletproof in all of the quote unquote red areas. some of the policies that have been going across, just they don't vibe with the American public. And so the Republican Party is going to have to make a choice. They're going to choose either their donors or their constituents. And if they choose the former, they may not be viable as a party for a lot longer. We're seeking to take back the GOP. Back to whenever Lincoln abolished slavery, or Teddy Roosevelt actually saved 230 million acres of what are now public lands. That's the GOP I grew up admiring, and that's the GOP I want to have in place again.
Wow. Well said. I like that. That gives me hope. I like that.
Thank you.
There's a lot of on the saving of the GOP, or the whatever you want to call it, reformation of the GOP party. It seems like a lot of these older guard GOP, the people that I remember from the 80s, just the regular GOP. Now we have this kind of crazy level GOP. But the regular guard is retiring, quitting, getting out, taking all the money and running, which good, get out, because run while you can. What I say, yeah. We're coming for you, right? So do you think that's what's happening? Do you think the Republican Party itself is like, we're fine with collapse, we're getting out of here? Or do you think there are still people within the party that have some decency and want to keep it alive?
Yeah, there are. There's absolutely some. We kind of have fallen to, okay, I don't remember the term exactly, but it was in media a long time ago. Something to do with if it bleeds, it reads, or something like that.
Oh, well, yeah, it's sensationalism.
Exactly. There are good Republicans who are in Congress right now that we just don't hear about. Right. I read a book recently written by Ken Buck, who's currently a congressman, I believe, from Colorado. It's called Drain the Swamp. And in it, he discussed a lot of the issues in his freshman term as a U.S. House representative of the corruption that he saw in politics with money in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party. He focused primarily on the Republican Party because he was a Republican, so he would see he had a lot more visibility on what went on the inside. But in it, he mentioned a lot of efforts from Republican representatives who I'd never even heard of. You never hear of in the media, and they were trying to do things like for instance, these huge omnibus bills. There are different programs that are on there that haven't been reauthorized since 1995 that we are spending money on. Wow. And there are Republicans who are trying to break that up to make people have to reauthorize it so that the government's just not wasting money on programs that we don't need anymore.
Right.
So that is fiscal conservatism, and that is trying to rid the world of corruption. But they're drowned out by the Ted Cruzes and the Donald Trumps of the world and everything else, the sensationalism, just like you were referencing there. So we don't really hear about them. Now, they may be the minority, but I don't know because we don't hear about them enough.
Right. And when you say we don't hear about them, we don't have control of the narrative. You're on this program. No one's invited you on CNN yet. The likelihood of that until you become the main contender is not going to happen. They just don't. The corporate media for both Republicans and Democrats, because we understand where I'm going with this. We understand that there are R's and D's. They mean something in certain places, but really we're looking at an establishment candidate versus a people's candidate, right? And you're a people's Republican candidate is what we're hearing here. I want to show people why the R is important in Tennessee's 2nd congressional district. This is from Wikipedia. The 2nd is one of the safest districts in the nation for the Republican Party. It is one of the few ancestrally Republican districts in the South. No Democrat has represented the district since 1855. The Republicans, or their antecedents, have held the district continuously since 1859. It was one of the only 2 districts in Tennessee, the other being the neighboring 1st districts, whose congressman did not resign when Tennessee seceded from the Union prior to the Civil War. What does all that mean, everybody? What it means is that that Tennessee was Republican when Republicans were Democrats. And they stuck with that R all the way through the change because Republicans shifted in the 1880s. Republicans, Democrats did a flip. But this district stayed a R regardless. The person who's leaving office right now was been in there for, I don't know, 20, 30 years, and he took over for his dad. It's time for a change in the 2nd district. And you're going against a couple of Republicans who seem to be like pretty much run-of-the-mill, hardcore, old-school Republicans that have lots of money. and are toting some pretty old values. I want to talk about your values because you're a BNC candidate. I want to show everybody. You made this announcement on November 15th. Running for brand new Congress. Marc's platform starts with create Medicare for all, which is, I only know one other Republican that said that, and that's Rob Ryersey. So, tell us about Medicare for all. Tell us what's going on in Tennessee and what you would do with healthcare.
Okay. Well, the best place to start as far as Tennessee goes, a lot of states, whenever the ACA was enacted, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, as some people like to call it, some states did not take the Medicaid expansion. Tennessee was one of those states. People here have really felt that. We have had in very recent times here a lot of Republican constituents shouting down Republican representatives in Republican town halls asking for Medicare for all because, once they saw what the rest of the country got with the Medicaid expansion, people started to realize that maybe the negatives that we heard about socialized medicine and all this, which Medicare for all is not in any sense socialized medicine, but people started to see that maybe there was something to it. And just a perfect example, something a lot of people wouldn't know or expect. Since I recently started a small business, my wife is an interior designer by trade, and so we saved up for about 6 years, and we moved down into a house that was built in 1940 in Knoxville with the intent of renovating homes for a living. Now, because of the way you make money when it comes to flipping houses, I don't have proper income, so I tried to get on her insurance. That was going to be so pricey, we couldn't afford it. So currently, as of January 1st, I no longer have health care because of Tennessee not taking the Medicaid expansion. Wow. So I can either spend an extra $4,000 this year for extremely minimal coverage,
right,
or we can just throw it in savings and pray that nothing happens. And that's what far too many Americans have to do.
Right. I mean, you're looking at catastrophe insurance, basically.
Right. Essentially, yes.
Right, and I almost think you're better off putting the $4,000 in the bank. I mean, that's what you did. I'm uninsured as well. Same story, right? So, I think it's common in America today. So you believe in Medicare for all, and you would see that implemented. You would work to implement that in Tennessee.
Oh, 100%. Because part of what I want to do is grow small business, and I know a lot of people say, well, what does Medicare for all have to do with small business? Okay.
Right.
A lot of people don't know right now that we give about $250 billion in subsidies to private companies just to provide health insurance for their employees. So, because they have to have that financial burden, we as taxpayers actually help out. So the benefit of Medicare for all is going to be twofold. One, we don't have to pay private companies to give their employees benefits any longer.
Right.
And two, it will free up small business owners who have to provide health care. It'll free up a lot of funds for them that they can use to hire more people or to reinvest in their industry. So that alone is enough for me, not to mention I've seen two different numbers. I've seen $9 trillion in savings if we institute Medicare for all in a decade. And I've seen up to $17 trillion in savings. That is a lot of money that we can put into other programs to benefit this country.
Right. I mean, it seems to me all the numbers indicate that it's fiscally responsible, conservative, makes sense for us to move into Medicare for all. Why is it that we have zero Republicans, besides yourself, in office, let me say, interested in moving forward with that agenda? What are they holding on to?
Well, speaking of numbers, their numbers disagree with you, and that's because those numbers are coming from their donors in the healthcare industry and in the insurance industry, and the largest industry in America, the largest lobby in America, the pharmaceutical lobby. We've had rampant corruption in government for far too long now. They don't do what their constituents want; they only do what the donors want, and this is a perfect example of that. Whenever a majority of the country agrees that we need Medicare for all, we should have Medicare for all. And neither the Republican Party nor the Democratic Party have officially come out supporting Medicare for all.
No, because both are really, they take a lot of money from the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry, right? And those industries would not benefit at all from Medicare for all or a single payer system, right?
Exactly.
I'm glad you mentioned corruption, because that's one of your platforms, one of the issues on your platform. Our politicians have been bought and paid for by the elites and the corporations, plain and simple. Until we get money out of politics, our representatives won't serve us and will just be beholden to their corporate donors, which is exactly what we're talking about. What do you believe we should do to end the corruption in our government? How do we do that besides replacing all the people? What do we do next?
Well, we may have to replace them all because once they get on that money train, it's really hard to get them off of it. But the one thing that we can do, the one thing that brand new Congress is doing, and all of our candidates, we have signed a pledge to take only small donations from individuals, no corporations, no lobbies ever,
Awesome.
no super PACs, and that will keep us true to our constituents. We work for them. We get paid by them. We should only get donations from them. The Supreme Court may not have gotten the memo, but corporations are not people. Citizens United needs to be reversed. Once enough of us get into office, we can address things like the public financing of elections and reversing Citizens United, although it is a Supreme Court decision. But it's steps like that will slowly rectify this. This didn't happen quickly. It's not going to be rectified instantly. It's going to take a while, and I'm willing to put forth the effort to make sure that this happens, to see it through to fruition.
Well, and I'm glad you say that. I mean, the Supreme Court's also been bought and paid for, it looks like. So we got some work to do there.
Yeah, that's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah, so we're looking at, there's a lot of different ways we can go about it. There's like Wolfpack going about trying to do the Constitutional Convention, right? At the same time, ALEC. So Wolfpack has 5 states on their Constitutional Convention. ALEC has 28 states on theirs, which is frightening. When you think about where they want to go with that. It's a good answer. Let's talk about probably the biggest issue that I think we have in relation to, corruption in politics, and the fact that you and I are here doing this, trying to change our government, and that is education. We spend nothing on education. We have one of the worst education systems in the world. Well, what do you think we should be doing with our citizens in terms of education?
Okay, well, as far as education, I'll start with higher education. I believe in tuition-free education for all Americans, for colleges, universities, and trade schools especially. There are a lot of people that don't really feel that college is the route that they need to go, but they still need job skills. And trade schools usually are kind of left in the fray whenever it comes to funding. Tennessee, a lot of people don't know because we are a very red state. We actually have a fully funded program. I believe it's called Tennessee Reconnect, and it actually allows adults that do not have an existing degree to get free college at any of the state community colleges. I want to try to use that plan and expand on it across the entire country because it's hugely beneficial. And everybody knows this little factoid, but your level of education is generally the biggest indicator into success in life and how much money that you will earn. And trade schools are no exception to that. So we definitely need to spread the funding around quite a bit. We're the richest country that has ever existed in the history of the earth. I think that we can afford to do better.
Nice. I agree with you there, and it's good to hear. I think more and more candidates are saying that it doesn't matter what party they're running for, that they understand that you got to have an educated citizenry if you want to have a functional democracy. It seems like we got that problem. Let's talk about taxes and government, and then we're going to go to Laura Livengood and see if we have any questions in the audience. I think we have lots.
Okay.
So the GOP just passed this massive tax bill. You want to bring back that fiscal conservatism. Let's talk about corporations. One of the big things about the Republican Party is, low taxes on corporations. What do you think we should do there?
Well, first of all, I think the tax bill needs to be reversed as soon as we can accomplish that. Whenever it comes to corporate taxes, we always hear this talking point about how the United States has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world and all this, but they never really talk about the fact that our effective tax rate on the corporations was around 20%. And some of the largest ones would shelter so much money overseas. And I believe in 2014, we lost $90 billion in tax revenue because of overseas tax havens.
Wow.
So, if we would recoup that money, we'd be able to do much, much more with our economy. And here's the funny thing about tax cuts. The whole notion that trickle-down economics is viable is completely wrong. There has never been a society that has actually functioned on the trickle-down principle that did not have rampant inequality. It just simply does not work. Nick Hanauer, if you've heard of him, is actually
Sure.
I believe he was one of the first investors in Amazon. He's a venture capitalist, and he was quintessential to getting the $15 minimum wage passed in Seattle. I have actually watched a lot of his talks and read a lot of his articles, and he raises a lot of really, really good points. Cutting taxes, one of the reasons that the GOP uses to cut taxes is they say it's going to create jobs, but it never creates jobs. They take that money, they give it to their CEOs, they give it to the shareholders, and the people that work for them never ever see it. So it's kind of twofold. Whenever we look at it, it's not just the tax cut, or in this case, an elevation in taxes. Although I honestly don't feel that we need to raise taxes above where they were previously or prior to the tax cuts that were recently passed. Okay. I believe we just need to enforce our tax code, and that would help our economy tremendously.
Okay, that's fair enough. So we put them back around 35%, but we actually stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industry and not letting them use loopholes, because the fossil fuel industry gets paid like 3 times by us.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's ridiculous how much money they make, and we're all of it. There's nothing back from them. So I'm with you on that. So you don't think we need to go up to the old where the Republicans had it in the 50s, where it was up to 70, 80, 90% up there? No?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's and I know the 90%. I believe it wasn't Eisenhower that had it
Yes.
as 90%.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's deceptive. It sounds horrible, but it's tiered. So I don't know the tax brackets, but some people may not know if they make $10 million, maybe only the last 50,000 is going to be taxed at 90%. I know that was to pay, I believe, for a lot of the military expenditures from the war and everything. So it may be necessary then. That may be a little too high in my opinion. The way I've seen it is simply that if we actually enforce the tax codes, get rid of the loopholes, and bring in the money that we should already be getting. Verizon Wireless, perfect example. One of the biggest telecom industries in the world, they paid less percentage in taxes in 2015 than I did. I believe they got a tax return.
Right. Yeah.
So that is ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous.
You and I both paid more in taxes than Verizon.
Yes.
I don't have my money.
Yes.
I don't have any millions.
Yeah.
I'm right with you on there. Laura Livengood, questions from the audience. What do we have?
Yes.
I waited a long time.
We've got a few questions. A lot of people really liking what you're saying we never heard a Republican sound like this. And there's a question about if elected, with whom would you caucus? The Democrats or the Republicans or independents, or what would your strategy be?
Yeah, that's one I've been asked actually a few times. That's a really, really big question. And it depends largely upon who gets elected. If enough of my independent Republican friends who are running now, I'm aware of 8 different ones across the country.
Wow.
If enough get in, caucus with the Republicans. Absolutely. Now, as far as independents, I believe we only have one independent in Congress, it's actually in Senate. It's Bernie Sanders. So
he caucuses.
Right.
With the Democrats.
So you can hang out with Bernie. That'd be cool.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I would probably stick with my party because I think that a lot of them need to kind of get a different perspective on things, because they seem to be pretty tone deaf on a lot of things, and I think largely it's due to the corruption, and I'm hoping that I can lead them back to the light to actually help the constituents out.
I love that. I was just going to say, lead by example. Go show them that there are Republicans who can have values that they used to have. Do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Good answer. Laura Livengood, other questions?
Yes. More questions. What do you think about Social Security? Do you have a traditional Republican view that it should be gotten rid of, or would you support it?
Oh, well, whenever you use the term traditional, I don't know how far back they go.
That's true. That's not fair to say.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Social Security is the most popular program in America. period, the most popular federal program, excuse me. So I approve of it personally, and as an elected official, which I hope to be, I would be remiss to actually go against something that, what was it, 92% of Americans approve of Social Security, and I believe somewhere, don't quote me on this one, I'm not positive, but somewhere in the 70% range or mid to upper 60s actually want it increased. So I approve completely of Social Security. We cannot privatize retirement like a lot of people want to do. People that receive money from Wall Street want to privatize it. They see
Right.
those pensions and the Social Security money, and they salivate, because right now I believe we have about $2.7 trillion surplus in our Social Security funds. Private industry would really like to get their hands on that. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think we need to gamble with our depositors' money, which is taxpayers' money, because a perfect example of what might happen is the 2008 crash. So Social Security needs to be maintained. Absolutely, I agree with the majority of Americans on that.
Awesome. Wonderful. Yeah, we don't need a repeat of borrowing from Social Security. That was a Reagan mistake.
Yeah.
Thank you for that
Okay,
answer. I appreciate that.
I've
Yeah,
got
keep going.
I've got a couple more. Position on the gun control issue, asks
Oh.
Joseph.
Yes, on gun control. Now, I am pro Second Amendment. I was born and raised around firearms. I was in the military also, so I've got
Thank you for
quite
serving.
well, thank you very much for your appreciation. So I've, knock on wood, never had any sort of mishaps. I had lots of training. I believe that. I'm also, I should say, a licensed concealed carry permit holder. So I do have the ability to carry concealed. I, of course, don't carry it in certain situations, schools, bars, government buildings, etc.
You don't go to Walmart with your AR-15?
Yeah, it's strapped right on the back. Yeah.
All right. That really wouldn't be concealed, but, they show the pictures of that. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, exactly. While we need to protect our Second Amendment rights, people around here, they like to hunt. And, a lot of times that's a family affair. It's a bonding thing. And, firearms can be positive when they are given the respect that they need. And the problem with our current laws is too many people have access to them that do not respect them and do not use them properly. I think that we need to look into the fact that, for instance, I believe 85% of the crimes committed with firearms are committed by people who have been convicted of domestic abuse in the past. So we should definitely look more into how they get these weapons and how do we remove these weapons from their possession. They obviously don't need it if they have a violent past. And we also need to look more into pushing for universal background checks. That's one of the few bipartisan issues out there that both sides agree on, yet we still can't get any legislation passed. So while I believe in protecting our Second Amendment rights, we need to look into reforming issues with access.
Agree. I mean, well, it seems like what we really need to do is have politicians that aren't taking money from the NRA.
That would help.
They seem to be, because they are the ones who have pushed this narrative, quite frankly, to where we have people saying, let's put guns in schools. Teachers with guns in schools is a good thing these days, which it blows my mind.
Yeah, that's absolutely insane. I can tell you from my military training, even gentlemen and ladies that were in the military still have trouble isolating the proper target and firing at it. We had quite a few. I don't remember the proper term. It's almost like virtual reality, but it's like more like an augmented reality program. A lot of people don't really know what the amount of training that military members go into.
No.
And one program we had was this huge screen. It was almost like a theater screen, and we all had weapons. They were actual M16s, except for they were retrofitted with lasers, essentially. And there were certain scenarios that we played out, and we would have to respond appropriately. And keep in mind, these are soldiers in the Army. I was in the U.S. Army, and so we had all been through all kinds of training. And what we saw was a lot of people had a mentality of shoot first and ask questions later. And it's because whenever you have a fear response, it's much harder to focus. And this is part of what the training did. And one thing that stuck with me, even to this day, was one training simulation had a bomb go off. It was in Iraq, and people came running out of the smoke. Well, those people were carrying weapons, so most of the soldiers around me immediately shot them in the head. Then they play the footage a little bit more forward. They show where everyone shot, and it turned out every single one of the people that were shot were U.S. Army soldiers who were running away from the blast. And so that was a lesson to everybody,
Wow.
that you need to pay closer attention. So now let's take that narrative and let's put a teacher into that situation who's maybe had a couple hours of firearms instruction.
Right.
What do you think is going to happen if we have an active shooter situation in a school?
More dead
You know,
people.
precisely. We have people that are trained to go into a war zone to react who are making mistakes.
Right.
We don't need that kind of firepower inside of a school.
Well, glad you said that. I agree. So you talked about universal background checks, and that seems to just get tossed around, and we have everybody saying it's not going to stop people from buying weapons. What do you feel about regulating guns like we do a car and having them have a license and registration and taking tests? Because in other countries, they do. It's a serious test and a serious battery of instruction before you can handle any kind of weapon. Would you push for legislation like that?
In part, when it comes to licensing, I agree with that. The way I look at it, I'm a concealed carry permit holder. I had to go through training at the sheriff's department. Then I had a background check by the FBI to make sure that I was okay to own a firearm, which that is essentially what a universal background check is. So I absolutely agree with that. Whenever it comes to registration, I have a couple of reservations. And it's largely in part of talking to my constituents and the way they feel about the registration. I believe that should be left up to the states. It seems a bit overreaching. And honestly, I probably need to look into some of the ramifications of that as well. So as far as like a major registration of all firearms, I don't really agree with that. I also don't think that many of my constituents agree with that. But universal background checks and licensing, I absolutely agree with. I also think that if someone has exhibited domestic abuse, as I was saying earlier, that their firearms, they shouldn't just be banned from purchasing more. They should be removed from the home. Because again, we have thousands of women around this country who are injured and killed by firearms from people who should not even have them in possession.
Agreed, including mentally ill as well, which is that provision was
Yes.
just rolled back. We just rolled back a lot of provisions that existed. The existing GOP just did that, but frightening. Okay, so we're going to talk more on that discussion another time. Guns control is a big issue there. Laura Livengood, do we have any other questions? Yes, you do. You're raising your finger.
Yes, I do. I have one more. Joy asks, how would you combat climate change in Tennessee? And would you work with activists trying to stop pipelines?
Oh, yes, absolutely. If you take a look at my platform, you'll see that I actually, myself and all of Brand New Congress, want to move to 100% renewable energy as soon as possible. 10 years seems feasible. Fighting back against pipelines and things. For instance, recently, the Dakota Access Pipeline. I actually had volunteered. I know about 1,000 veterans, I think, showed up to protest, and around 5,000 volunteered. They just didn't have room to accept everyone.
Right.
So, whenever it comes to activism in that, this is the only Earth we have. I know one of the chants in the climate march was there is no planet B. That's very accurate. Elon Musk is trying to get to Mars, but it's no Earth.
No.
So we've got to take care of the planet that we have. Some of the issues with climate change that we've incurred so far are irreversible, and all we can do is try to adapt. Unfortunately, if we continue on the same path we are on currently, it's going to get a lot harder to feed our people because crops won't be able to grow properly with the massive fluctuations. I'm glad that we got away from the term global warming because it's not it's a cumulative warming across the entire globe, but the big issue is the rapid change in climate. For instance, last week here in Tennessee, it was 8 degrees. Today it was 62, 63. Totally uncharacteristic for this time of year. So the scientists at NASA, I trust, who have been studying climate change, they said it's actually advancing more quickly than they thought, and we really have to act drastically. We've got to do something. This is probably the most imminent threat to human life as we know it in existence right now.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. I agree. It's I got to say this. It's refreshing to hear more and more people say, we got to get away from the term global warming and then explain why exactly. Because I mean, I've been talking about this for decades. I'm an old guy, and back with Al Gore and prior to that. So, we use the term global warming. What we saw, I don't know if you saw what happened when Trump pushed out his tweet about global warming the other day during the big East Coast freeze, and he was rebuked by the world. Right? That was, everybody was like, it's extreme climate, you dumbass, and it was so beautiful to see and to hear you just speak it so eloquently and say, no, this is what it is. Blah. That's change right there, my friend. Thank you.
Oh yeah. It's wonderful. I love it.
So what do you, there's a lot of neoliberals, Republicans that are still heavily invested in and want to keep fracking. Jerry Brown. Fracking. What do you think of these intermediate? Do you think we need? You said 10 years. Do we need to use fracking to wean ourselves off the fossil fuels?
Well, okay. Here's the thing about fracking. There is actually an alternative to fracking. A lot of people don't know about fracking in and of itself. Let me be clear: we do not need to be pumping hundreds of toxic chemicals into our groundwater supplies just to get natural gas. I've seen countless videos of people lighting their tap water on fire from wells. That's not appropriate. There is actually another method to get methane deposits at the bottom of the ocean. I don't recall exactly where. I believe somewhere in the area of the Bermuda Triangle. There are natural gas deposits which are actually greater than the ones that are in the ground. They're a little bit harder to get because they're so deep, but they're actually frozen. They're compressed by the weight of the water and they're frozen. And so we could simply send down probes to use that. And what's funny, I'll admit some misconceptions I had about natural gas for quite some time. I used to think that they didn't put off any greenhouse gases. It's actually just less than coal. So natural gas is not a long-term solution at all. But there are better methods than fracking to access it in the interim of transitioning over. And we need to start trying to transition now because it's going to take a while. It's not going to happen overnight.
Well, agreed, but I got to say, methane, as far as a carbon global warming fuel, is far worse than CO2, and so to extract it from the ocean frightens the hell out of me. So you're interested in continuing to work with natural gas in an interim to get till we get to fully renewables, and it's interesting. Is there a lot of that going on? Is there a lot of industry embedded in Tennessee in fossil fuels that you would need to deal with?
Not so much. Apparently, we do have some a pretty sizable amount of natural gas reserves, which luckily have been untapped so far. There have been efforts to actually tap into that, and they've been blocked, thankfully. Oh. We do have something called TVAs, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and they have a system of hydroelectric dams. So we actually have a decent amount of clean energy here. We are still utilizing coal, though, and I would like to move away from that. That, in my opinion, should be the first thing to go. They use the term clean coal. There's no such thing as clean coal. It still puts off CO2 quite profusely.
It does. Although, interestingly enough, I mean, I don't want to continue coal either, but they now have developed methods of not making clean coal, but taking the coal byproduct and turning it into another chemical, which I thought was quite interesting. They're still trying to figure out a way to make clean coal. They keep working on it. We've already got better ways to do this with renewables, so I'm not sure why we want to spend any more money on that. But I appreciate your answers. I appreciate your knowledge on that. I want to switch to talk about our justice system. And you got a couple aspects to cover there because you are a veteran. Gun carrier, and I want to start with justice in terms of police force and what you think, and I'm going to use this is in my view, what you think we need to do to bring police to heel, because it seems like they don't answer to anybody. What do you think about that? Where do you think we sit with our police force in the nation, but in Tennessee? I don't know if there's any particular issues there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our police here are okay. I haven't really heard of any shooting of unarmed civilians in the area in which I live in my district since the mid '90s. So it's not really a rampant problem here. I think that the biggest solution is going to be proper training in our police force. I believe inside cities, African American males are shot the most, and outside the cities, it's the mentally ill. So we definitely need a lot more training to teach officers how to respond to de-escalate a situation. Too often, they come out guns blazing because they're taught, your life is the most important. Well, not always. Officers are there. They're supposed to be officers of the peace, first of all, and they're supposed to put their life on the line to protect others. That is their job. Now, I don't want an officer to die in the line of duty. I want every single one of them to go home. But sometimes you have to ask yourself a question: Is this possibly mentally ill person who's standing 20 feet away from me holding a knife really an imminent threat? Do I really need to shoot this person? Or maybe should I call for backup? Maybe should I try to de-escalate the situation some other way? And also, this sounds cliche, but in many areas, it takes more training as far as length of training to become a cosmetologist than it does to become a police officer. That needs to change. We need to respect our officers a little bit more by giving them the training that will allow them to do their jobs properly. I think just along with teachers and firefighters, we also need to pay them a little bit more. If they feel more appreciated, maybe there won't be as much of this frustration, and they'll be a lot more likely to commit to reform and to making things a little bit better. We also need to do a little bit more community policing. I think that the police need to be introduced to the public that they protect instead of being painted essentially or feeling like an occupying force. Because anytime that you put basically the police on one team and the citizens on the other team, you automatically have a problem right there. We're all on the same team. We're all Americans. We need to act like it.
You just said one of the coolest things. When you said we need to respect our police officers a little more, which made me cringe, and then you said by providing them more training and paying them better so that they might feel a little better about. I love that. It's across the board. If I take away my anger and rage and feelings about the police and their conduct in general, because quite frankly, we have either cops that are out of control or cops that are silent, which means they're too afraid to come out against the cops that are out of control, right? That's a big problem when they're supposed to protect and serve. They need better training. They should be able to disarm a person and without reaching for their gun and blowing 9 holes in them and finding out they're a kid, right?
Absolutely.
When you were describing this military training, I'm like, my God, could you imagine if our police had to go through something like that? I think they should. I think they should really have to do that. I love the way you said that. In Tennessee, what would you do there? Would you try to enact some legislation because here's my question. It's more than the officers. We obviously have a problem with the chiefs, with the judges, right? Because cops just say, I felt endangered, boom, you're gone. You're exonerated, we're not ever going to try. So what would you do to fix that in Tennessee?
Okay. Well, since my position would be federal, it would wind up actually.
True.
I couldn't do it specifically for Tennessee. Oh, no, that's perfectly fine. Well, let's see. The one thing that I think would be best would be to have independent investigations anytime that we actually have an officer that, say, shoots an unarmed person, or like, oh goodness, I can't believe the name escapes me. The 12-year-old boy in Ohio, was it Cincinnati or Cleveland, that was shot within 2 seconds of the police officers pulling up because he had a toy gun at a park?
Yes. I don't know which one. Which one, Laura?
Tamir Rice, I think.
Tamir Rice, exactly. Okay. So why were those police not indicted? They didn't even see a courtroom. That doesn't make sense. There was footage which showed them pull up in the grass and gun the boy down. So I really do believe that although we need to respect our police a little bit more, we need to give them more training, we need to pay them a little bit more. We also need to crack down on the bad apples. Something like that. There is no excuse for what they did. I don't care what that boy was holding. It was a toy gun in the hands of a 12-year-old at a park. They could have easily parked across the street and yelled at the kid. Most police cruisers have megaphones built in.
Right.
They could have told the child, hey, we think that's a weapon, drop it or we're going to shoot. Whatever happened to the days whenever somebody says hands up or else we're going to shoot, freeze, don't move. Are you really going to tell me that 12-year-old boy would have tried to fight back? I mean, he would have obviously dropped the weapon, excuse me. See, I even said weapon. Dropped the toy, and then they would have found out it was nothing, and everybody could have carried on about their business.
No, yeah.
But whenever something like that happens, and it's so obvious that there is a blatant issue, they need to be indicted. They need to be investigated by, in my opinion, a federal bureau that is completely detached from the police force. Because what happens is, whenever you have a DA that works with those police every day,
Right.
they know them. They go to barbecues together. They can't indict them. They can't convict them. So it's a conflict of interest, and that is the biggest problem to police reform.
Interesting.
That stands in the way of police reform there.
I didn't even think about that. They know them. They shouldn't even be allowed to be involved with. They should have to recuse themselves and have them tried in a completely different place, right?
Yes, I agree.
That's, imagine that. So that's just changing laws. That's enacting laws, which is something you can do at a federal level. Well, Paul, I keep asking about Tennessee. Sorry about that. I want to just one more question about reform, and this is something a little more akin to me since I'm in Oregon and I'm a marijuana smoker. This is you responding to an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweet. It says 70 people arrested for less than an ounce of marijuana at a party, but not one person jailed for the 2008 financial crisis. And you say, to those of you that state there is equality in our justice system and that the rich and powerful don't play by a different set of rules, I present to you the astute observations of my friend Ocasio 2018. Where do you stand on cannabis? And then let's talk about that reform that needs to happen.
Okay. Well, they have recently found that humans have been using cannabis for about 12,000 years, and we still don't have one recorded death.
Yes.
Nice fact. I'll sound like a broken record because everybody says this part. Alcohol kills about 85,000 people a year. Tobacco, 435,000 people a year. So if you want to come at it from a public health problem, there's really no argument for it.
Right.
The war on drugs has been a waste of taxpayer money. 49% of people in prison are there for nonviolent drug offenses. The vast majority of those are marijuana. I can go on for hours about this kind of stuff. But the most relevant reason to decriminalize marijuana is that we can use it for medicinal purposes. It has been proven to be effective in a litany of different health issues, anywhere from Parkinson's to epilepsy, to multiple sclerosis or muscular dystrophy. I forget which. I believe it was MS.
All sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is, I don't know if you all saw the news article recently. For 2 years in a row, our life expectancy in America has gone down, specifically because of how many opioid deaths we have every year.
Yes.
That's a problem. In 1999, the CDC commissioned a study of the 13 states that had legalized marijuana, and it ran all the way through to 2010. So it's a very comprehensive study. They found that in every state that marijuana was legalized, opioid deaths dropped by a quarter. So, whenever you want to talk about public health, legalizing marijuana would actually be better for public health because people don't get addicted to it. Right. They don't die from it. And we have people that have legitimate pain issues. But the problem is the biggest drug dealers in this country, the pharmaceutical industry, are pushing opium-based drugs on them, which are highly addictive and deadly. So I think legalization, federal legalization, would benefit this country tremendously.
Wow.
From so many different perspectives.
Yay! I'm with you there. They allowed the synthetic to be legal, which has killed people. Ironically,
yeah.
K2 has killed people. We've ran a little over, but that's because we started a little late. I hope you don't mind on that.
Oh,
you've been
totally fine.
Phenomenal, answering tons of questions. We've just grilled you with all sorts of stuff. It's been awesome. Thank you. And I didn't get a chance to bash on the two Republican opponents. I really wanted to get a chance. Everybody needs to see there's a litany of red. You use the word litany. I'm going to grab it from you. There's that many Republicans. It's the red race. Tim and Jason and Brad and Ken and Jimmy and Vito and Mark. And there's probably going to be more. And there's some Democrats running. The top two people involved, because the incumbent right now is gone, right? They're not staying.
Yes.
They're gone.
Yes.
it's just, I don't know what you know about this. You said you were going to tell me something that was interesting about one of these two guys, and I don't remember which one, but I just want to show everybody some slides before we get into this. These are the people, these are the regular Republicans, all right? Tim Burchett, who is being investigated by the FBI with the help of his wife, which must make dinner conversation quite interesting. Not really sure what that's about. And
ex-wife is what that
oh, is
was.
it ex-wife?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, it's his ex-wife.
Well, that
That
makes
makes
it
it
better.
interesting.
Yes, even more interesting. This is the other guy, Matlock, and he believes in trickle down. He believes in marriage unity between man and woman. We're going back a ways with this Republican. So those are your choices on the R's. I mean, those are your two leading candidates, and then we have Marc Whitmire here, who is a completely new breed of Republican. What do you think is going to be your biggest challenge in District 2 for competing against these guys for you?
Seeing as how we have over 700,000 people in this district, it's just going to be reaching everyone. Predominantly, I believe 95 or 98% of campaigns with the most money wind up winning the election. So,
right.
There's no way I'm going to outraise either one of these gentlemen. So what we're trying to focus on is a grassroots effort. So I'm going to every single community event that I can go to meet with concerned citizens, to tell them what I'm doing, what I'm about. And that grassroots, man, that's where it's at. And due to social media and the internet, and in part to Trump being elected, I always try to look at the positives in situations. And Trump being elected, there's been a lot of negatives, quite a few negatives, but people are paying a lot more attention now. And so I think that my message will resonate with my constituents in my district. Most of the Republicans I've met, they don't talk about same-sex marriages. They don't talk about tax cuts being a positive thing. They talk about corruption in politics, and they talk about getting Medicare for all. Right. Those are the two big ones. So my biggest hurdle is just getting the word out. And social media is great with that. Brand New Congress, I cannot thank them enough. I couldn't do it without them. Awesome. They have a wonderful organization that's nationwide that's trying to spread the word for all of our candidates. And so if you haven't heard of us, it's brandnewcongress.org. I highly recommend you check it out. You might actually have someone in your area that you can support.
There you go.
If not, people can volunteer to do things online, to do phone banking. And of course, there's always donations, which are always a positive, since we are taking no money from corporations or lobbyists. Our small donations are extremely important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for being on the program. It's refreshing, and I really hope that you can bring what I'm going to call traditional Republican values back to the Republican Party. Right. I want to show you one last thing. I was doing research on candidates, and I Googled Jim Matlock, and this is what I got. Literally, Jim Matlock for Tennessee, and the first thing that comes up is his obituary. And I thought, well, that's cheating right there. You don't get to run and be dead. That's just sneakier than Dianne Feinstein at this point. That's anyway. Thank you for being on. Will you come back? I'd love to invite your Republican opponents to come on and do a roundtable with us. Would you do that?
Oh, I would too. I would love to have a debate.
Wonderful.
That would be absolutely wonderful. And I'll come back anytime. Just you give me a couple days notice, and I'll be here.
Awesome.
I love you guys. You're great.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark. Laura Livengood, thank you for handling all the questions. Really appreciate it.
You are quite welcome. Great chat tonight. Everybody behaved themselves really nicely.
I saw that. And listen, I know we didn't get to all your questions. I saw tons of other questions. We're going to have Mark back on. We're going to talk more. This is early. We're early. When's your primary? When do people need to be aware and vote and helping you?
August, I think, right?
August the 2nd, yes.
August 2nd.
So I'm later in the year, which is great because some of the other Brand New Congress candidates, especially in Texas, I believe their primaries are in March.
Wow, yeah, fast.
And Illinois as well. Yeah, and we have some in May. I believe that's Arkansas. And so they're kind of structured out in that way. So it's beneficial for the staff at Brand New Congress because they're pretty much all volunteers.
That's awesome. That's the way this revolution is running. Volunteers and the generosity of donors and just hard work on the ground. And thank you for running, because candidates have the most difficult job. And I just want to tell you this. there is no such thing as a losing candidate right now in the progressive movement. Every candidate pushes the agenda towards the left. And I really appreciate you doing that from a Republican position in Tennessee. Thank you so much, Mark. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
So tell us about the song, which I love this song. I'd Love to Change the World by 10 Years After. Why'd you pick it?
Well, I picked it because it really resonated with me. You know, whenever it was written, we were going through social upheavals. There was a political unrest as well. And, you know, in the song, they say, I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do. Well, back then, they knew what needed to be done, what needed to be changed. They just simply didn't have the means to do it. There was big money interest against them then. There's big money interest against us now. But now we can unite. We have social media. We have the internet. And this is what it takes. We have to build a grassroots effort, and we have the tools now that they did not have then. So that song means a lot to me. The first time I ever heard it, I felt the same as I do now, and I love that song.
I love what you said. I was thinking when I was listening to it earlier, going, but we know what to do now.
Yeah.
We know. We put Marc Whitmire in office, right? We know
Yes,
what
sir.
to do.
And all
Thank
his
you for being
friends.
here. Yes.
Every
All the
single one of them.
progressives. All right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, no, you know what I
Mark.
forgot? We got to
What?
talk about who's coming up on, we got all these things. I loaded these slides. I always forget who's coming up. We got Town Hall for Progressive Democracy, which is coming up on Saturday. Before then, we have, not going in order. Hang on, everybody. We have the Progressive Washington Show, which is Fridays at noon. That's going to be, they're going to talk about Washington's health care. The ballot initiative is being revealed, which is big. That's from whole Washington. And then on Saturday, we've got the Town Hall for Progressive Democracy, Housing and Homelessness, with Tim Harris being a keynote. And then we're going to have a panel discussion. And then next, January 15th, we've got Adrienne Bell, candidate for Texas, 14th District. And 2
He's a running
days.
for Congress.
Is she? Oh, excellent. And then we have Peter
This is
Jacob
Peter.
as well. See, we're just running through the BNC candidates. Boom.
Easy
So-
pickings.
Yeah. So join us for all that, please, and share this event, guys. It helps if we get reach. I know we've got our core 300, but we need to make that 3,000.
Oh, John, don't forget Sunday shows. Progressive Oregon on Sunday morning and Progressive California on Sunday night.
There you go. I don't even have their card loaded.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Laura. That'll
Oh,
be good.
don't worry about that. And my guest Sunday night is going to be Michael Feinstein, who's running for Secretary of State in California for the Green Party. And we're going to talk about election integrity.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Everywhere is freaks and Harris, dykes and Ferris. Tell me where is sanity? Tax the rich, feed the poor. Tell there are no rich no more. Population keeps on breeding. Nation